So I hadn't planned, sorry. So I hadn't planned on doing these back to back. I figured once or twice a week is enough to inundate you guys with. But last night I was watching the news, and really the big thing that came to my mind was the hypocrisy that's going on in the country right now. When we think back to what happened with Chauvin and George Floyd, right, the media's big spin on it was that this was racially motivated and all cops were bad. Now, I don't know if you've seen the rest of the video. They finally released more of this video. And there's like 9 minutes of George Floyd, who is very clearly high, resisting getting in the back of the car. They're trying to get him in peacefully. He's telling them that he's claustrophobic and all of this stuff. That does not in any way, shape, or form excuse what Chauvin did. Understand that. There's also been stuff that came out that they used to work together. They knew each other. So again, not that that excuses it in any way, but the fact that this was spun as this white cop who hated this black man and therefore killed him isn't really the whole story. And so the first part of that is when we see these videos, we need to stop, first of all, because everybody just reacts. But we need to stop and we need to think about what's the rest of the story, right? Even when I watched the beginning of that, I was like, okay, what happened just before that? Because that's just weird, right? For a cop to do that for 9 minutes. Now, obviously, Satan had a hold of him, and there was more going on than we even know. But the big point about this was the hypocrisy that came out. So we were told that this was racially motivated and all cops were bad. And even when people came out and said, yes, there are some bad cops, but that doesn't mean that all cops are bad, the belief was that, no, we can't have that. All cops are bad because some of these cops are bad. Now let's fast forward a little bit. After that happened, we had a bunch of protests. A lot of them were peaceful. A lot of them were not. And all the people on the left side kept saying, oh, no, it's peaceful protests. It's peaceful protests. Even up in Seattle where we were, I had a friend who went up there and he was like, yeah, during the day it was pretty peaceful. At night, it got a little crazy. And then, they had to shut it down after two people got killed. So not peaceful when people start dying. Portland's been going on for like 80 something days now. So this is really what I want to talk about is Portland. There was a congressman who stood up in Congress. I don't know his name. He's from Oregon though. But he stood up and he said, oh, the protests in Oregon are peaceful. There's nothing going on there. There's a few bad people who are choosing to do lawless actions, but that's not the majority of the people. So we have these few bad cops who chose to do lawless actions, and that signifies all the cops. And so we have to defund police departments across the country. But we have these few bad people who are choosing to do lawless actions in bunches of riots, not just Portland, but bunches of riots. And that's okay because the rest of them are good. The rest of them are fine. Do you see how this is the problem? We can't have it go both ways. We can't have all the cops be bad because some cops are bad and all the protesters be good because most of them are good. See, that doesn't work. Like you have to decide if you're going to lump everybody together like that, and you really shouldn't, because what somebody else does is not what I'm doing, right? We could do the same thing with teachers, right? Every time, and thank God I haven't heard any for a while, but every time I hear about a teacher having a relationship with a student, I'm like, oh, I'm sort of disgusted to be a teacher at this point, right? And nobody's ever come out and vilified every single teacher when that happens, because most of us know that that's not okay, and we would never do that. So why are we doing that with cops? Why are we coming out and saying these people who put their lives on the line for us every day, right? They're all bad because this one guy or these 4 guys or even these 10 guys were bad. That's just not the way it works, right? There are people who do bad actions in every single occupation across the country. Now, cops unfortunately get looked at a little more, just like teachers do. When we do something wrong, it makes the news more than, the paper guy or somebody who works at a grocery store or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you can apply that to everybody. And if you're going to do that, then you have to do it equally, right? So if you're going to say because of these bad cops, all cops are bad, then you also have to do it for the protesters. And you have to say because of these protesters, all protesters are bad. But that's not happening, right? And last night, came to this edge. I don't know if you guys watched it. If you don't watch Fox News, you probably didn't watch it. And I'm going to tell you straight up, I don't believe everything that comes on Fox News, but they show a lot of stuff that the rest of the mainstream media doesn't show, right? And so last night, several of them had this video of this man who was pulled from his truck and kicked and beaten unconscious on the ground. And this man did nothing to defend himself. He didn't have a gun. He didn't push anybody. He didn't even talk, right? Like, he literally let himself be a ragdoll and be punched and kicked unconscious by these people, right? And one guy literally just waited until he was sitting there, probably stunned, and then head kicked him to the pavement. This is not okay, right? And when you look at what's happening now, I don't know all of the ins and outs of what's happened with police and profiling of African American people. And I'm not going to pretend that I do. Do I think there are some problems? Absolutely. There's problems with everything. But when you take entire chunks of money out of departments, and especially police departments who are there to keep us safe, crime is going to go up. And then you have prosecutors coming out saying they're not going to prosecute people for particular crimes, right? It has to be a certain dollar amount or a certain, you have to kill somebody, honestly, really, at this point. And even then, I'm not sure that these people are going to get arrested who kicked this guy down in Portland. So that's a problem. And all of these people on the left who are scratching their head and saying, oh no, it's just because of COVID. There's no other reason that crime would go up. There's absolutely a reason crime would go up when you take away police who are there to defend you, and when you totally demean them to where they're quitting in record numbers and they're afraid to do their jobs because they're afraid they're going to get sued or cancel culture or whatever, then crime is going to go up. And it's the same thing in schools, you guys. When we did that, we went through this thing where we were like, oh, we can't punish kids when they do bad things. Well, you know what they learned to do? They learned to do more bad things because they knew they could get away with it. It wasn't that it stopped their bad behavior. It enforced their bad behavior, right? This is why we tell parents and we tell teachers, find the good things and praise those. If you're going to, talk to a kid about something they did wrong, find some stuff they did good too, because we should focus on the good. Because when we reinforce the bad behavior, that's how they get attention. So what do they keep doing? They keep doing the bad behavior. And let's talk about the funding for a second, because I know a lot of people out there are like, oh, they don't need all this money. First off, I read some teacher comments that just made my head want to explode. And they were like, oh, they shouldn't get paid $60,000 a year when we don't get paid $60,000 a year. Okay, first of all, stop. Yes, do teachers not get paid what they're worth? Absolutely, right? But I don't, and maybe you work in a school where this happens to you, but I don't go into school every day wondering if I'm going to come home alive. And there's a lot of those cops that do, right? When they leave, they don't know for sure they're going to come home. Now, we all don't know what's going to happen with us. Anything could. But typically, most of us don't go to a job where we have to really wonder if we're going to come home to our families, right? So that makes it worth a little more pay. But secondly, here's the thing, right? And I've seen this happen in education. When you cut money from departments, you know what the first thing to go is? Training. Yeah, training. Because when you ask employees, would you like to have healthcare? Would you like to have smaller class sizes? Would you like to have a raise? Would you like to have a cost of living increase? Or would you like to have training? What do you think the people who are working in these jobs want, right? They want the same things the rest of us do. They want more money. They want smaller caseloads. They want blah, blah, blah. Training is not high on their list. And so when you cut money from departments, huge departments like cops or teachers or things like that, the first thing that you cut is training. And if you want these cops to have better ways to de-escalate, you need to give them more money, not less, and earmark it for training, right? Give them money that says this cannot be paid for salaries, this cannot be overtime, this cannot be whatever. It is mandated for training. That's how you start to fix the problems. You don't take huge chunks out and defund a bunch of the cops. You don't demoralize them. You don't cut hundreds of officers, especially up in Seattle where they've created this huge, diverse group of officers, and then they're going to have to cut like 100 of them who were the last hired, and most of the last hired were the most diverse, right? So let's stop. Let's stop and take a second and actually think. First of all, if you're going to apply those assumptions from one category to another, you have to do it equally, right? And that's not right. You shouldn't be doing it either way. So let's stop applying one person's actions to everybody in a group. People are individuals, and what they do is what you should judge them on, what they personally do. And secondly, we need to look at, if we really want to make a change, funding training and not defunding. Okay, that's my rant for today. Love you guys.